Hi everyone, I just wanted to spend some time doing a little mini lecture about case study research, since that's what the readings are about. Hopefully this will help you to interpret and maybe extend some of that into thinking about what the purpose is for all of this in our literacy program. The first thing for me is a reminder that this approach to research is actually assessment. So this is a way of doing assessment that makes sense for us as classroom teachers. So frequently we're asked to do things with data and use test scores and so on in ways that just seem ridiculous to us in terms of decision making. It's like they give us this big swath, this big generalization that's based on the test scores, and we know in our heart of hearts that it just doesn't match these kids that we're working with one-on-one. The one thing that we know about literacy development is that each kid starts at a different place and they progress at different rates. So anytime we use testing to make big decisions, we're assuming that that big blanket that we've thrown over everybody applies to every one of those starting points and rates, and it really doesn't. What it does is it helps us to give us a starting point for asking questions, and that's what research and assessment are both based on, is that asking and answering of questions. What do I want to know? How can I best learn that information? So beyond interpreting test scores, which would be one use of case study research, another use of this case study research would be to go deeper and answer the how and why questions. Why did this happen? Or why is this person looking this way and that person looking that way? When we see the test data, or you can even ask about a method that's being used. So if we're being asked to do a particular thing, we can dig in and figure out, well, why do we do that? When does it work? When does it not work? For whom, and so on. So I'm just going to do some examples of that from practice. So if we wanted to use research or inquiry to check on existing practices, we could take something like repeated reading, which is we're being asked to do that all over the place for fluency. It's one of the techniques that is research-based in the normative research. So the question that I would have if I had my classroom right now is that I would be saying, well, if we're going to do repeated readings, when does it work best? For whom does it work best? And when it does work, why does it work? And for these people that it's not working for, why does it not work? So, and I have kind of a hypothesis behind that. It's like repeated readings. What is that all about? I know that it's about practice, but I know that really strong readers actually do repeated readings because they love the books. So we find people who read the same books over and over again and go back to favorite books over and over again because they have motivation that goes along with it. And yet we're being asked repeatedly to do repeated readings that have almost no motivation behind them. It's just practice for the sake of practice. So what would happen if we tried to figure out, oh, how do I do it so that there's motivation involved with it too? Or can I tell that the kids it's not working for, it's because they're not strongly motivated? So let's see if I get the better light there. Another thing that we've been told in the research repeatedly is that the volume of independent reading makes a huge difference in kids' growth as readers. So I would be interested in asking questions about specific kids for that. What would happen if we did this with independent reading for this kid? Or we could ask why and how questions. Why are some of my kids not progressing with independent reading? And for the kids who are progressing, how are they doing it? What does it look like? Let's see, another practice that we see fairly frequently that would be interesting to check out in case study would be visualization and comprehension. I'm interested in that kind of research myself right now, where we really don't know how it works. How do kids actually visualize? Why do they do it when they do it? Those are interesting questions that we could answer. So the other thing that I've mentioned already is that so we could ask questions about practice like that, but we could also ask questions about testing data. So if a person has shown a particular score on a standardized exam, we could just ask the questions about why is that so, or how does that relate to the kid's actual reading? When we do these things, when we ask these how and why questions, and that's what Diane Barone really emphasized in her chapter is that case study research is best suited to answer how and why questions, which means that the surface level questions of what and when and how and so on, those journalist questions, we go for depth by asking how and why. So you would want to think about questions that the existing data doesn't give you a deep enough answer for, and you use the case study to go in a little bit deeper. So the reason that that's a key assessment strategy, I just got off of a conference call with the literacy coordinators for St. Vrain School District, and they were asking us about assessment in this program, and we talked about this course because one of the key leadership issues that districts and district literacy coordinators are seeing is that schools are taking the data that they get from tests and just using it to make huge decisions when those tests were not designed to be diagnostic that way. Those tests weren't designed to break it down to the individual level and tell you this is exactly what's going on with this kid. Almost all of those tests were designed to give you a direction to look, and you're supposed to go in your classrooms and figure out, for my kids, what's the real story here? What questions can I ask that will help me figure out each one of the kids? And that's where classroom assessment comes into place. So the things that you already know how to do to figure out what kids know and how they can do it and so on, those are the strengths of case study research as assessment. This is also the strength in countries that are actually doing well with education. If we look at studies of education in Finland, the strength in their education system comes from the fact that so many of their teachers are well trained in classroom-based assessments, which means that they're constantly doing mini case studies to figure out each one of the kids. So for you to go forward, you might want to think about a couple of things. One is that a case study in a course that's this narrow in time scope, 8 weeks long, you might want to think about how can I answer some how and why questions in depth for a particular kid who is a really interesting case. It might be a situation where you see a kid who kind of struggles in a particular way year after year. There are certain profiles that we tend to see over and over again, and those kids kind of baffle us. And we can get in and figure out, oh, what makes that kid tick? What is the thing that's going on there? Not necessarily in a negative way, just actually figuring out that particular kid. What are the strengths that we can work on? What are the things that get in their way, and so on? The other way that you could handle case study with a small group would be to take a question that you want that depth of answers for and look at it for a few kids to kind of give you a composite for how that phenomenon works. That's what I might do for something like repeated reading, because repeated reading is a thing we're being asked to do. I want to take like maybe 3 or 4 different types of kids that I see regularly and see what does it look like and feel like for each one of those kids. Same could be done with a particular set of kids who seem to be scoring similarly on a test. So that's the issue with case study research. I'm just going to dig in and see some of my notes. We probably don't have time in this class for any of you to do a multiple case study. I think that you could probably do a case study that involved one setting, but maybe 3 or 4 kids studying that particular setting, like repeated reading or guided reading or something like that, so that you have data from a bunch of different kids to give you a profile or a composite. The way we might be able to get a multiple case study done would be if maybe 2 or 3 of you were interested in a really similar question, and then you went out to your different settings and studied the phenomenon in your settings, and then the group of you brought your data back together and thought about how it answered the questions that you had by each of you doing some of the data collection in different classrooms. The next thing that I think that I would coach you to do is I would coach you in the case study research chapter, Diane Barone's chapter, to think about which of those big important case studies sounded like the most interesting one to you. And I'm going to coach you to go get that. Get the book from the library, get the research article from UNC's library, and get that in hand, and we'll put that into play as a reading of your own choice probably for module 2 or 3. So I think that's the key stuff that I wanted to talk about case study research. And we'll talk a little bit more in Module 2 about how you'll come up with the kinds of questions that you want to go in depth on. But just to end on that note, it should be something that you're really interested in figuring out for your classroom, for your kids, something that you may have thought about over and over again. You didn't know how it worked. You didn't know why certain kids performed one way, certain kids performed another way, or you're puzzled about how to actually use some of the testing data that's being pushed your direction and make it make sense. So those are things that you should think about as you're looking at a research question, is what's going to make you and your kids' life better in the classroom. All right, talk to you soon.